I lost $890,000 in 14 months, not to a bad investment, not to a market crash, to a woman I trusted with my business, my future, and my name. She didn't steal it all at once. She did something smarter. She built a mirror company, redirected my contracts one by one, and by the time I realized what was happening, there was nothing left to fight for. I'm 65 years old. I spent 40 years climbing the corporate ladder, made vice president at a Fortune 500 company, retired with what I thought was enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I'm not some naive kid who got scammed by a bar girl. I negotiated million-dollar contracts. I managed teams across 3 continents. I understood business, or so I thought. Turns out understanding American corporate law doesn't mean much when you're dealing with Thai commercial structures and a woman who studied them specifically to exploit them. This is going to be hard to tell. Not because I'm embarrassed, though I am, but because even now, 2 years later, I still can't quite believe I let it happen. When I go through the timeline, when I look at the documents I still have, when I remember the conversations, the signs were everywhere. But I was 63 years old, recently divorced, lonely as hell, and she made me feel like I mattered again. That's a powerful drug when you've spent 2 years watching your relevance evaporate. I should start at the beginning. My marriage ended in 2022. 28 years, 2 kids, a house in Connecticut that we split down the middle. My ex-wife got the lawyer we'd known for 15 years. I got the bill. The divorce wasn't messy by most standards, but it hollowed me out. We'd grown into different people. She wanted to travel, see the world, rediscover herself. I wanted routine, stability, the comfortable decline into old age. We were both right, we were both wrong. Either way, it ended. The company I'd worked for since 1989 offered me an early retirement package in 2023. The industry was consolidating. They were cutting senior management. They made it attractive enough that saying no would have been stupid. I took the money, shook hands with people I'd worked alongside for decades, and walked out of that building feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. For the first time since college, I had no structure, no meetings, no deadlines, no purpose. I lasted 4 months in Connecticut before I couldn't stand it anymore. My kids were grown, living their own lives in California and Texas. My friends were still working or coupled up, busy with grandchildren and retirement projects I couldn't relate to. I'd sit in my condo watching the leaves change color and wonder what the point of it all was. I'd spent 40 years building toward this moment of freedom, and now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. A former colleague, guy named Bill, who'd retired 3 years earlier, sent me photos from Chiang Mai. He'd moved there with his wife, bought a condo overlooking the mountains, was living on a fraction of what he'd been spending in Seattle. The photos showed temples, night markets, mountains wrapped in mist. It looked peaceful. It looked warm. It looked like somewhere I could reinvent myself. I'd never been to Thailand. I'd barely been to Asia except for business trips to Singapore and Hong Kong, where I never left the hotel district. But I was 63 years old, with no obligations and enough money to try something different. So I bought a plane ticket. I arrived in Bangkok in February 2024. The heat hit me like a wall when I stepped out of the airport. I'd arranged a hotel in Sukhumvit, one of those serviced apartment places that catered to long-term foreign residents. For the first week, I just walked. I walked until my feet hurt, then took the BTS back and collapsed in the air conditioning. The city was overwhelming. The traffic, the noise, the food smells mixing with exhaust fumes, the language I couldn't begin to understand. But there was energy there. Life. People going about their business with purpose. I realized I'd been sleepwalking for months. I met Min at a business networking event. I know how that sounds. American retiree meets young Thai woman. But it wasn't like that. Or at least I didn't think it was like that. The event was organized by the American Chamber of Commerce, focused on consulting opportunities for foreign business people in Thailand. I'd started thinking about doing some consulting work, not because I needed the money, but because I needed something to do. I needed to feel useful. Min was there representing a Thai logistics company looking to expand into American markets. She was 33, wearing a navy business suit, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had an MBA from Chulalongkorn University. She spoke English with barely an accent, peppered with business terminology I recognized from 40 years of corporate meetings. When she approached me after my presentation about supply chain optimization, she asked intelligent questions about regulatory compliance and market entry strategies. She treated me like an expert, like someone whose experience mattered. We exchanged business cards. She followed up 2 days later with an email asking if I'd be interested in consulting for her family's logistics company. I didn't know it was her family's company at the time. She presented it as her employer's business. I said I'd consider it, but wanted to know more about the operation first. She suggested dinner to discuss details. I said yes. That first dinner was at a restaurant in Ceylon, one of those places where the menu has no prices and the servers wear gloves to place napkins in your lap. Min had reserved a private room. She arrived with a presentation deck on her iPad, profit and loss statements, growth projections, market analysis. For 2 hours, we talked business. She explained that her family's company had been operating successfully in Thailand for 15 years but was too small to compete for international contracts without foreign partnership. She said my background in corporate logistics and my American business credentials could open doors they couldn't access alone. The business proposition made sense. They had local infrastructure and knowledge. I had international connections and expertise. It was a classic partnership opportunity, but I was cautious. I'd seen too many foreign business ventures in Asia fail because of cultural misunderstandings or legal complications. I told her I'd need to see more documentation, meet her business partners, understand the legal structure before I committed to anything. She didn't push. She thanked me for my time, paid for dinner despite my protests, and said she hoped we could work together but understood if I needed to think about it. As we were leaving, she mentioned she'd be happy to show me around Bangkok properly if I wanted to see the city beyond tourist areas, not as a business meeting. Just as someone who knew the city showing someone who didn't, I said that would be nice. Over the next month, Min became my guide to Bangkok. She took me to restaurants I never would have found on my own. Small places in Chinatown where the owners didn't speak English and the menu was just whatever they were cooking that day. Night markets in districts I'd never heard of. Temples that weren't in guidebooks. She explained things patiently when I didn't understand customs or etiquette. She laughed at my terrible attempts to speak Thai, but in a kind way that made me want to try harder. I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice she was beautiful. She was, but that's not what drew me in. What drew me in was that she treated me like I was interesting. Like my stories about business negotiations in the 90s weren't boring. Like my opinions on global supply chains mattered. My ex-wife had stopped listening to my work stories years before our divorce. My kids tolerated them out of politeness. Min engaged with them. She asked follow-up questions. She connected what I said to things happening in Thailand's economy. She made me feel like the person I used to be before retirement made me irrelevant. By April, we were seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week. It still wasn't romantic. Or at least we weren't calling it that. We were business associates, exploring a potential partnership who also enjoyed each other's company. I'd extended my visa, moved from the serviced apartment to a proper condo rental in Thong Lo. I was settling into a routine, morning coffee at a cafe where the barista knew my order, lunch meetings with Min, afternoons working on the business proposal she was developing, evenings exploring the city, or staying in to watch Netflix with Thai subtitles, trying to learn the language. The business proposal evolved. What started as a consulting arrangement transformed into something more substantial. Min suggested we form a partnership company. Not just me advising her family's business, but a new entity that could leverage both our strengths. She'd handle Thai operations, local permits, workforce management. I'd handle international client development, quality control, strategic planning. We'd split profits 60-40 in my favor, reflecting my larger initial investment and expertise. On paper, it looked solid. I'd invest $400,000 for infrastructure and initial operating capital. She'd invest her existing logistics network and local knowledge. I should have hired a lawyer, a real lawyer, Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in foreign business partnerships in Thailand and had no connection to Min or her family. But I didn't. I used a lawyer she recommended, a friend of her family's who assured me the structure was standard and would protect my interests. Looking back, that was mistake number 1. Or maybe it was mistake number 17, and I just stopped counting early mistakes because the later ones were so much worse. We signed the partnership papers in May 2024. I wired $400,000 to the company account. Min registered the business with Thai authorities, got all the necessary licenses and permits. She found office space in an industrial area near the port. She hired staff. Within a month, we had our first client, a mid-sized American manufacturer looking to distribute products in Southeast Asia. The contract was worth $60,000 for 6 months of logistics coordination. I'd leveraged my old corporate contacts to set up the introduction. Min's team handled the execution. It worked exactly as we'd planned. That first success felt incredible. I'd been retired and aimless for over a year. Now I was building something new, something that mattered. Min and I celebrated at a rooftop bar in Sathorn, Bangkok glittering below us. She toasted to our partnership. I toasted to new beginnings. That night, for the first time, she kissed me. Not a business associate kiss. A real kiss that made me feel 30 years younger and stupid enough to believe age didn't matter. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know what people would think. 63-year-old American man, 33-year-old Thai woman. Business partnership that became romantic relationship. I knew exactly what it looked like, but being inside it felt different from how it looked from outside. Min wasn't some uneducated woman from a poor village looking for a meal ticket. She had a graduate degree. She came from a middle-class Bangkok family. Her father had been a civil engineer. Her mother was a retired teacher. They lived in a comfortable house in a decent neighborhood, not a mansion, but not poverty either. When I met them, they were polite but not fawning. They asked me intelligent questions about America and my career. They seemed genuinely interested in their daughter's business success, not my bank account. Min's family situation was complicated, but not in the way I'd heard about in expat horror stories. Her mother had diabetes and required medication that wasn't fully covered by Thailand's healthcare system. Expensive, but manageable. Her older brother had a legitimate business installing air conditioning units, but was struggling with debt from a bad expansion decision. Her younger sister was a teacher with 2 kids whose husband had left her. These weren't made-up emergencies. I met these people. I saw the medical paperwork. I visited her brother's warehouse where he had unsold inventory. This was a normal Thai family dealing with normal financial stresses, not scammers running a coordinated con. Or so I thought at the time. By July, Min and I were living together. She moved into my condo in Thong Lo. It happened gradually. First she stayed over after late business meetings. Then she kept clothes at my place. Then one day I realized all her belongings were there, and she hadn't been back to her own apartment in 2 weeks. It felt natural. We worked together, spent our evenings together. We're building a future together. Why maintain 2 residences? The business was growing faster than I'd anticipated. We landed a second American client, then a third. By August, we had 5 active contracts worth a combined $300,000 annually. We needed to expand. More warehouse space, more staff, better computer systems. Min handled all of it. She found properties, negotiated leases, hired workers, set up accounting systems. I focused on client relationships and quality control, the things I was good at. It was a genuine partnership, or it felt like one. In September, Min suggested we formalize things further. Not just business partners, but actual partners. She didn't propose marriage explicitly, but she talked about building a life together. About how, if we were serious about the business long term, we needed to think about succession planning, legal protections. What would happen if something happened to one of us? She mentioned that in Thai culture, this kind of serious partnership was often formalized through marriage. She wasn't pushing. She was just saying. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I was 64 years old. I'd been married once already. Marriage hadn't saved that relationship. But I was happier in Bangkok with Min than I'd been in years in Connecticut alone. The business was succeeding. We worked well together. I enjoyed her company. She seemed to enjoy mine. The age difference bothered me sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep and thought too hard about what I'd be like at 75 when she'd still be 45, but in the daylight it didn't seem to matter. We got married in October 2024 at the district office in Bangkok. Her family attended. Mine didn't, not because they disapproved, but because flying to Thailand for a civil ceremony seemed excessive and my kids had work and their own families to manage. We took photos outside the office, Min in a cream-colored dress, me in a suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion because everything I owned made me look like I was about to give a PowerPoint presentation. We had dinner with her family at a Chinese restaurant in Yaowarat. Her mother cried. Her brother made a speech about family and new beginnings. Her sister gave us a framed photo of a temple. It felt real. It felt like we were building something permanent. 2 weeks after the marriage, Min suggested we restructure the business. The current arrangement had the company registered with me as majority stakeholder, but Min as managing director because Thai law required certain operational roles to be held by Thai nationals. She proposed we create a more balanced structure now that we were married. She said it would make business operations smoother, give her more authority to sign contracts without needing my approval for every decision, streamline our ability to respond quickly to opportunities. She had a lawyer friend draw up new papers, the same lawyer friend who'd handled the original partnership agreement. I should have said no, or at least said let me have my own lawyer review this. But I was married now. We were partners in every sense. Questioning the legal structure felt like saying I didn't trust her. And I did trust her. Why wouldn't I? She'd been handling operations flawlessly for months. The business was growing. We were making money. Every decision she'd made had been good for the company, so I signed the restructuring papers without reading them as carefully as I should have. The restructuring changed more than I understood at the time. I'm not saying Min's lawyer explained it wrong. I'm saying I didn't ask enough questions. The new structure made the company equally owned between us, but gave Min signing authority for contracts and operational decisions without my countersignature. This made sense for efficiency. She was in the office every day managing operations, while I was mostly handling client relationships remotely. But what I didn't fully comprehend was how much control I'd just given up. In November, we landed our biggest contract yet. A logistics agreement with a manufacturing client worth $200,000 annually for 3 years. Total contract value, $600,000. This was exactly the kind of client I'd envisioned when we started the business. The contract required us to expand operations significantly. We needed a second warehouse. We needed to hire 8 additional staff members. We needed to upgrade our transport fleet. Min presented a budget requiring an additional $250,000 investment from me. The return on investment would be substantial once the contract was fully operational, but we needed capital now to scale up. I wired the money. That brought my total investment to $650,000. Everything I'd put into the company. I remember sitting at my computer, looking at the transfer confirmation, feeling simultaneously excited about the business growth and vaguely nauseous about how much money I'd now committed. But Min was right there, excited, talking about how this contract was going to establish us as a major player, how we'd be able to compete for even bigger opportunities. Her enthusiasm was infectious. December arrived. The new warehouse was operational. Staff hired and trained. Transport vehicles purchased. Everything moving according to plan. Min was working 12-hour days. She'd leave early in the morning, come home late in the evening, exhausted but energized by the business momentum. I spent my days managing client communications, reviewing reports, handling administrative tasks. It felt like we were achieving something significant. I started noticing small things in January. Nothing dramatic. Just odd details that didn't quite make sense. One morning I tried to log into the company accounting system and found my password had been changed. Min said it was a security upgrade, gave me the new password. But when I logged in, some of the financial records seemed incomplete. Revenue figures that didn't match my client contracts. Expense categories I didn't recognize. When I asked Min about it, she explained they were operational costs I wasn't familiar with, things like permits and license renewals and Thai tax obligations. She said she was handling all of that. I accepted the explanation. In February, one of our American clients mentioned they hadn't received an invoice from us in 2 months. I found this strange because we billed monthly. I asked Min about it. She seemed surprised, said she'd sent the invoices. Maybe they got lost in email. She said she'd follow up immediately. The client received an invoice 3 days later, apologized for the confusion, said maybe it had gone to spam, but I remembered the invoice number. It didn't follow our sequential numbering system. It was off by several hundred numbers. I checked our database. The invoice numbers between December and February had gaps, hundreds of missing invoice numbers. I asked Min about this. She looked at the screen for a long moment before explaining that she'd been issuing invoices under a new company registration number because our original registration was having tax complications. She said her accountant had advised creating a subsidiary company to handle certain contracts while the main company's tax status was being resolved. This would be temporary, a few months at most. She said she'd been meaning to tell me but didn't want me to worry about administrative details while I was focused on client relationships. I asked to see the subsidiary company registration. She said the paperwork was at the accountant's office. She'd bring it home. She never did. Every time I asked, there was a reason she didn't have it. The accountant was traveling. The office was closed. The documents were being filed with government authorities. Always a reason. After the 5th or 6th time asking, I stopped asking. Not because I was satisfied with the answers, because asking made me feel like I didn't trust my wife, and I didn't want to be the kind of husband who didn't trust his wife. March came. I noticed Min was spending more time away from the condo. Business meetings that ran late, client dinners I wasn't invited to, weekend trips to Chonburi and Rayong for site inspections. I suggested coming along to some of these. She said it wasn't necessary. These were routine operational checks. I'd be bored. I said I didn't mind being bored. She said she preferred I focus on the client relationship side because that's where my real value was. I accepted this logic even though something felt wrong. One of our clients called me directly in late March, an American company we'd been working with for 8 months. The owner said he wanted to discuss renewing the contract. I said that was great. We'd be happy to continue the partnership. He seemed confused. He said he was already working with us under the renewed contract. They'd signed paperwork with Min 2 months ago. Extended for another 2 years at a higher rate. I had no idea what he was talking about. I pulled up our contract database. There was no record of a renewal. I asked him to send me a copy of the contract he'd signed. When the PDF arrived, I stared at it for 5 minutes, trying to understand what I was looking at. The contract was with a company called Min Solutions Limited. Not our company. A different company. But it had our office address. It had Min's signature. It had the client's signature. It was dated the 15th of January, 2025, 2 months ago. This contract was worth $80,000 annually. It should have been going through our company, our partnership, but it wasn't. I searched company registration databases. Min Solutions Limited existed, registered in November 2024, 1 month after we got married. 2 weeks after I signed the restructuring papers that gave Min full operational authority. The company was wholly owned by Min. The registered address was our office address. The business description was identical to our partnership company. It was a mirror company. A shell company, designed to look exactly like our legitimate business but funnel revenue directly to Min without my involvement. I sat there looking at the registration documents, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. How many contracts had been diverted to this other company? I started calling clients, one by one, making casual inquiries about paperwork and invoicing, asking them to send me copies of their most recent contracts. Of the 8 active clients I thought we had, only 3 were actually working with our partnership company. 5 were working with Min Solutions Limited. Contracts worth over $400,000 annually had been redirected to a company I had no ownership stake in. I confronted Min that evening when she came home. I put the contracts on the dining table and asked her to explain. She looked at them for a long time without saying anything. Then she sat down and started crying. This confused me. I'd expected anger or denial. I got tears. She said she'd done it to protect the business. She said I didn't understand how complicated Thai business regulations were. She said there were tax advantages to running certain contracts through a Thai-owned company versus a foreign partnership. She said she'd been planning to tell me once she had all the administrative details sorted out. She said she wasn't keeping the money. It was all going back into business operations. She said she'd never meant to hurt me. She said she loved me. I wanted to believe her. Even sitting there with proof of systematic contract diversion, I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. Because the alternative was accepting that the woman I'd married, the business partner I'd trusted with $650,000, had been stealing from me for months. I asked to see the financial records for Min Solutions Limited. She said she'd show me everything. She said we could sit down with the accountant tomorrow and go through all of it. She said I'd see that everything was legitimate, just structured differently than I understood. She kept apologizing. She kept saying she should have communicated better. She kept touching my arm, my shoulder, trying to maintain physical connection while I felt myself pulling away internally. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her in bed, watching her breathe and wondering how much of the past year had been real. Had she loved me at all? Or had I been a target from that first networking event? A retired American with money and business connections who could be manipulated into funding her real business while thinking he was a partner? The next morning, the accountant meeting didn't happen. Min said the accountant was sick. Could we postpone a few days? I said no. I wanted answers now. She said she couldn't just pull financial records instantly. They were with the accountant. She'd have to make copies, organize things. I said I'd wait. She got angry then. Said I was treating her like a criminal. Said if I didn't trust her, maybe we shouldn't be married. Said I was acting like a typical controlling Farang who couldn't accept that Thai business operated differently. I backed down. Not because she was right. Because I didn't know how to fight this fight. I'd been married once before. I knew marriage counseling voice versus genuine conflict. This was genuine conflict. This was the conversation that happens before someone moves out. And I wasn't ready for that. I still wanted there to be an explanation that made sense. For 3 weeks, I investigated quietly. I contacted every client we'd ever worked with. I reviewed every bank statement I could access. I discovered that Min Solutions Limited had been operating since December 2024, the month after our marriage. In 4 months, it had processed over $600,000 in revenue. Revenue that should have been flowing through our partnership. Revenue I had no access to, no visibility into, no share of. I also discovered something else. The big contract we'd landed in November, the $600,000 3-year deal that had required my $250,000 investment for expansion, that contract wasn't with our partnership company. It was with Min Solutions Limited. I'd funded the expansion of her personal company while thinking I was investing in our shared business. Every piece of equipment I'd paid for, every staff member I'd funded salaries for, every warehouse lease I'd covered, it was all under Min Solutions Limited. My $650,000 had built a company I had zero ownership stake in, a company that existed solely to divert revenue away from the partnership that was supposed to be our shared future. I compiled everything into a folder: contracts, bank statements, company registration documents, communications with clients. I took this folder to a lawyer, not Min's family friend lawyer, a different lawyer, one who specialized in foreign business disputes in Thailand, an Australian woman who'd been practicing Thai commercial law for 20 years. She looked at my documents for 15 minutes before she spoke. When she did, she was blunt. "You've been completely defrauded," she said. "Your wife created a shell company, systematically redirected your business assets and contracts to that shell company, and used your capital to fund it. You have very limited legal recourse." I asked why I had limited recourse if what she'd done was clearly fraud. The lawyer explained that Thai law regarding foreign business ownership was complicated. The restructuring papers I'd signed had effectively ceded operational control to Min. The contracts were being fulfilled, so clients had no complaints. The money I'd invested was documented as capital investment, not loans. Proving criminal fraud would require showing intent to deceive from the beginning, which would be nearly impossible. Civil remediation would require years of litigation in Thai courts, probably cost another $200,000 in legal fees, and might recover 30 cents on the dollar if I won. The truth is, she said, you signed papers without understanding what you were signing. You gave your wife full operational authority over a business you'd funded. She used that authority to divert revenue to her own company. It's unethical as hell. But proving it's illegal in a way that gets you your money back, that's a different question. I asked what she recommended. She said I had 3 options. 1. File criminal charges for fraud, except that this would take years and might yield nothing. 2. Attempt to negotiate a settlement with Min, essentially bargaining for some fraction of my investment back in exchange for walking away. 3. Cut my losses, divorce her, leave Thailand, try to rebuild my life. I went home. Min was there. She asked where I'd been. I told her I'd been to see a lawyer, a real lawyer, one who wasn't her family's friend. I told her I knew everything. The shell company, the redirected contracts, the systematic diversion of business I'd funded. I told her I wanted my money back. She didn't cry this time. She got very calm. She said I could try to get the money back through legal action. She said I'd lose. She said Thai courts favored Thai nationals in business disputes, especially against foreigners who didn't understand local law. She said the restructuring papers I'd signed had given her legal authority to make operational decisions, including how contracts were structured. She said I'd be spending years in litigation and hundreds of thousands more on lawyers for nothing. I asked if she'd planned this from the beginning, if our entire relationship had been a setup. She didn't answer directly. She said she'd seen an opportunity. She said I'd been willing to invest in the business because I wanted to feel useful again. She said she'd provided value. She'd built a real operation. The business was successful. She said the only difference was who owned it. I asked if she'd ever loved me. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You're 65 years old. I'm 33. Did you really think this was about love?" I moved out the next day, took my clothes and my laptop and left everything else. The furniture I'd bought, the kitchen supplies, the framed pictures of us that now felt like evidence of my stupidity. I found a short-term rental in a different neighborhood, a studio apartment that cost 12,000 baht a month, about what I used to spend on a single dinner in the first months with Min. I filed for divorce. Min didn't contest it. The marriage had lasted 6 months. The divorce took 8 weeks. During that time, I attempted to negotiate some kind of settlement. Min's lawyer offered me $50,000, less than 10% of what I'd invested. I countered with $300,000. They came back with $75,000. Take it, or spend years in court with no guarantee of getting anything. I took it. $75,000. I'd invested $650,000. I got back less than 12%. The rest was gone. Used to build a business I had no ownership stake in. A business that was thriving under Min's management, generating revenue that should have been mine, employing staff I'd funded salaries for, operating out of facilities I'd paid to lease. I left Thailand in September 2025, flew back to the United States with 1 suitcase and a checking account balance of $83,000. Everything else I'd had when I'd arrived in Thailand 18 months earlier was gone. The retirement savings I'd spent 40 years accumulating, the divorce settlement from my first marriage, the early retirement package from my company, all of it funneled into a business partnership that had been a trap from the beginning. I'm living with my daughter now. She and her husband have a house in Austin with a guest room they've converted for me. They're kind about it. They don't say I told you so, even though my daughter had expressed concerns about moving to Thailand, about the age difference with Min, about the speed at which I'd committed to the business. She'd asked me to slow down. I'd told her I knew what I was doing. I'd told her she didn't understand. I'd been wrong. I've been applying for jobs. At 65, with a resume that stops in 2023, having lost a year and a half to what I can't really explain in interviews. I got offered a part-time consulting position with a supply chain company paying $45,000 a year, less than a tenth of what I made as a VP. But it's something. It gives me structure. It gives me somewhere to go during the day, so I'm not just sitting in my daughter's guest room cataloging my mistakes. I looked up Min Solutions Limited a few months ago, out of curiosity. Maybe masochism. The company is still operating, still successful. Min expanded into new markets. She has contracts with major international clients. She built exactly the business we talked about building together. She just built it for herself using my money. I've tried to identify where I went wrong. Not just the obvious mistakes like signing papers without proper legal review or giving her operational control, but the deeper error, the fundamental miscalculation that made everything else possible. I think it was believing that my business experience made me smart about all business. I'd spent 40 years in American corporate environments. I understood those rules. I understood those power dynamics. I thought that knowledge was transferable. That understanding supply chain logistics in Connecticut meant I'd understand partnership structures in Bangkok. It didn't. The rules weren't different. But my ability to see clearly within those rules was compromised by loneliness, by ego, by wanting to believe I was building something significant. I also think I wanted to believe I was special. That my relationship with Min was different from all the other age gap foreign Thai partnerships that ended badly. I'd heard the stories. The bar girls who drained bank accounts, the sick buffalo scams, the village houses that disappeared. I'd thought those stories didn't apply to me because Min was educated, because she came from a middle-class family, because our relationship was based on business partnership rather than romance for money. I thought I was smarter than those other guys. Turns out the scam was just more sophisticated. The end result was exactly the same. What makes it worse is that I enabled my own destruction. I didn't just fail to see the trap, I built the trap. Every investment I made gave her more resources to expand the operation I thought we were building together. Every dollar I wired made her shell company stronger. I was the architect of my own financial ruin. I don't know if I'll recover from this. Not financially. I'm 65 years old. I have maybe 20 good years left if I'm lucky. I'll spend most of those years trying to rebuild savings I already had at 63. I'll probably work until I'm 75 just to have enough for basic retirement security. I'll definitely never have the kind of financial comfort I had before Thailand. But the financial loss isn't even the worst part. The worst part is not being able to trust my own judgment anymore. I made a career making high-stakes decisions, evaluating risk, assessing partnerships. I was good at it. I thought I was good at it, and then I walked into an obvious trap and funded it with $650,000 because I wanted to believe a beautiful woman loved me. I see other people in relationships now and I wonder if they're all lying to each other. I see elderly men with younger partners and I want to warn them. I want to shake them and tell them to wake up. But I don't, because I know what they'd say. They'd say their situation is different. Their partner really loves them. They've been careful. They understand the risks. The same things I said to anyone who expressed concern about Min. Someone asked me recently if I regretted moving to Thailand. I said no, that's not quite true. I regret how it ended. I regret the financial devastation. I regret the naivety. But I don't regret trying. I was miserable in Connecticut. I was dying slowly of boredom and irrelevance. At least in Thailand, I felt alive for a while, even if that aliveness was based on a lie. If you're reading this and you're considering something similar, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. That would be hypocritical. I'd probably do it again even knowing how it ends. But I will tell you this, get your own lawyer, not their lawyer, not a friend's recommendation. Your own lawyer who has no connection to your partner or their family. Read every paper you sign. Understand the implications. Maintain control of assets. Don't confuse love with business. Don't confuse business with love. And don't ever convince yourself you're too smart to get scammed. That belief is exactly what makes you vulnerable. I'm 65 years old. I'm living in my daughter's guest room. I'm working part-time to rebuild retirement savings I already had. The woman I thought was my wife is running a successful business I funded. She's moved on. New partner, probably. new opportunities. She won, I lost. That's the story. The thing nobody tells you about getting scammed is that it's not just about the money. It's about realizing you were wrong about everything. Wrong about her. Wrong about yourself. Wrong about your ability to evaluate situations. It's about spending the rest of your life questioning every decision, because if you got something this important, this wrong, what else are you wrong about? I don't have answers. I don't have redemption. I don't have a happy ending where I recovered the money or found a better relationship or learned some profound lesson that made it all worthwhile. I just have the knowledge that I spent $650,000 in 18 months building someone else's dream while thinking it was mine. That's the story. That's what happened to me.